Now let's begin this one. Graham Peck sat at his drafting table in the converted den of their Riverside home, penciling final touches on a restaurant renovation proposal. The afternoon sun caught the dust motes floating through the air, and he could hear his 8-year-old daughter Alexis practicing piano in the living room, the same clumsy rendition of Fur Elise she'd been working on for 3 weeks. His wife Megan breezed past the doorway, phone pressed to her ear, her blonde hair pulled back in the severe ponytail she'd adopted recently. "No, Thursday won't work," she said curtly. "I told you I have that thing." She disappeared toward the kitchen without acknowledging him. Graham rubbed his eyes. They'd been married 11 years, together for 13, and somewhere in the past 6 months, the woman he'd fallen for had become someone else. Not dramatically. There'd been no shouting matches or obvious affairs, just a gradual cooling, like watching ice form on a lake. She stayed out later, smiled less, touched him even less than that. He'd tried talking to her about it twice. Both times she'd deflected with practiced ease, blaming work stress at the pharmaceutical company where she managed clinical trials. "You wouldn't understand the pressure, Graham. Not everyone gets to play artist for a living." The comment had stung, but he'd let it go. He usually did. "Daddy." Alexis appeared in the doorway, her dark hair, his hair, escaping from her braids. "Can you help me with the hard part?" "The hard part is all of it, sweetheart," Graham said. But he was already standing, grateful for the distraction. His daughter was the one pure, uncomplicated joy in his life. Smart as a whip, curious about everything, with his dry sense of humor and none of Megan's sudden coldness. They spent an hour at the piano before Megan called them for dinner. The meal was tense and quiet, punctuated only by Alexis's chatter about her friend's birthday party. Megan checked her phone 3 times. "The house has been making weird noises," Graham mentioned as they cleared plates. "I think something's up with the wiring in the attic." "Scheduled an electrician for Friday." Megan's head snapped up. "Friday?" "Yeah. The crackling sound is getting worse. I don't want to risk a fire." "I have appointments Friday," she said quickly. "Important ones." "You won't even be here." "He's coming at 10. Something flickered across her face. Fear? Anger? Before she composed herself. "Fine. Whatever." That night, lying in their bed with 2 feet of cold space between them, Graham stared at the ceiling. His instincts, honed by years of studying architectural spaces and human behavior, told him something was fundamentally wrong. Not just with his marriage, but with his entire life. Clayton Singh arrived Friday morning in a white van with Singh & Sons Electrical emblazoned on the side. He was a compact man in his 50s with graying temples and the cautious demeanor of someone who'd seen things go wrong. "The attic access is upstairs," Graham said, leading him through the house. Megan had left early for her mysterious appointments, kissing Alexis's forehead but barely glancing at Graham. "I've been hearing crackling near the main bedroom." "Could be aluminum wiring," Clayton said. "Houses from the 70s, you see a lot of problems." Graham left him to work and returned to his drafting table. Alexis was at school. The house felt too quiet. 2 hours later, he heard footsteps on the stairs. Fast footsteps. Then Clayton appeared in the doorway, and Graham's first thought was that the man looked like he'd seen a ghost. His brown skin had gone ashen, and his hands were shaking. "Mr. Peck," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We need to talk." "Not here." "The garage." Graham's pulse quickened. "What did you?" "Not here," Clayton repeated, glancing at the ceiling. "Please." They walked to the detached garage in silence. Clayton kept looking back at the house like it might explode. Once inside with the door closed, the electrician pulled out his phone with trembling hands. "Sir, I don't know your situation. I don't know what's going on in your marriage. But you need to get your daughter and go. Right now? Don't tell your wife anything. What did you find?" "There's no time to explain everything. Just look." Clayton pulled up a video file. Graham watched his own bedroom appear on screen, shot from a high angle. He saw himself sleeping. Then another angle, the master bathroom. Another, Alexis's room, her bed clearly visible. "Oh God," Graham whispered. "There are 7 cameras hidden in the attic crawl space," Clayton said. "Professional installation, not amateur. They're wireless, broadcasting to somewhere. And there's audio recording equipment. I found." He swiped to another file. This. A voice recording played. Megan's voice, crystal clear, Thursday night. "He'll be asleep by 11. The dosage has to be exact. We can't have him waking up during transport." Another voice, male, unfamiliar. And the girl? She comes with me. That was always the deal, Damien. Graham's world tilted. He gripped the workbench to steady himself. There's more, Clayton said. Financial documents. Offshore account information. And he hesitated. Sir, there are photos. Of your daughter. Nothing's happened yet. But the angles, the way they're taken, someone's been watching her. Closely. Rage and terror flooded through Graham in equal measure. Who installed these? I don't know, but it's recent. Few months, maybe. The equipment is high-end. This is organized, Mr. Peck. Whatever your wife is planning, she's not alone. Graham's mind raced. Thursday night. That was yesterday. But nothing had happened. Why? I heard her on a call this morning, Clayton continued. She didn't know I was already up there. She was arguing with someone. Said you changed the schedule by having me come today. She sounded angry. Scared, maybe. So they postponed, Graham said slowly. His architect's mind was already working, analyzing, planning. They postponed because you were here. I think so. Sir, I'm calling the police. No. The word came out harder than Graham intended. Not yet. Clayton stared at him. Mr. Peck, your wife is planning something terrible. I know. And if we call the cops right now, we'll get what? She'll lawyer up, claim she didn't know about cameras, that I installed them, spin some story. The evidence we have is ambiguous. That voice recording, she never says my name, never explicitly says what they're planning. A good lawyer shreds that in court. But your daughter is at school for 3 more hours, surrounded by teachers and security. Graham was thinking fast now, his mind sharp and clear for the first time in months. Clayton, I need everything you found. Every file, every photo of the equipment, every recording. Can you do that? The electrician nodded slowly. Already copied it all. Good. Send it to this email. Graham grabbed a business card and wrote on the back. Then I need you to finish your work like everything's normal. Fix whatever wiring actually needs fixing. You were here. You found old aluminum wiring. You replaced it. You left. That's the story. What are you going to do? Graham looked at the house, his house, where his daughter slept, where he'd built what he thought was a life. I'm going to find out exactly what my wife is planning. And then I'm going to destroy her. Graham picked up Alexis from school himself, something he didn't usually do. Her face lit up when she saw him waiting by the fence. Daddy, why are you here? Thought we'd have an adventure, he said, keeping his voice light. How about we grab ice cream and go to that bookstore you like? But what about piano practice? We'll practice later. Today, let's just play hooky. They spent the afternoon in careful normalcy. Ice cream, books, a walk along the river. Graham studied his daughter, looking for any signs that something had happened, that someone had hurt her. But Alexis was bright and happy, chattering about a science project on volcanoes. She didn't know. Thank God, she didn't know. When they finally returned home at 5, Megan's car was already in the driveway. Graham felt his jaw tighten, but forced a smile as they walked in. Megan was in the kitchen, and something was wrong with her smile. Too wide, too bright. There you are? I was wondering where my family went. Ice cream date, Graham said. Where were your appointments? Oh, you know, the usual. She turned back to chopping vegetables with slightly too much force. How did the electrician go? Fine. Aluminum wiring issue. He fixed it. That's all. He was here for hours. Old houses. Graham shrugged. Lots of little problems. That night, after Alexis was asleep, Graham lay in bed and waited. Megan had taken a sleeping pill. She'd started doing that recently, he realized now. Another piece of the pattern. Around midnight, when her breathing deepened and slowed, he slipped out of bed. In his home office, he opened the encrypted email from Clayton. 7 video files, a dozen photos of equipment, and 6 audio recordings. He started with the recordings, headphones on, volume low. Over the next 3 hours, he pieced together his wife's betrayal. Megan was having an affair with someone named Damien Shepard, an old boyfriend, apparently, who'd recently gotten out of prison. The conversations went back weeks, growing progressively darker. They were planning to drug Graham, transport him somewhere while unconscious, and make it look like he'd abandoned his family. Megan would get the house, the assets, everything. But Alexis, that's where it got truly nightmarish. Megan didn't want custody. She wanted to sell her to Damien's contacts. She's worth more than everything else combined, Megan had said in one recording. Fresh, young, undocumented transfer. We're talking $500,000, maybe more. Graham had to leave the room to vomit. His daughter, his beautiful, innocent daughter. Megan had given birth to her, raised her for 8 years, and was now planning to sell her like livestock to God knew what kind of monsters. When he could think again, Graham opened a notebook and began to write. Names, dates, connections. He worked until dawn, building a picture of his wife's conspiracy. By the time sunlight crept through the windows, Graham Peck knew exactly what he had to do. And it would require becoming someone he'd never been before. Someone dangerous, someone methodical, someone willing to cross lines he'd never imagined crossing. Because the justice system wouldn't save Alexis. The police would take too long, make mistakes, let lawyers muddy the waters. His daughter didn't have time for that. She needed her father to become something else entirely. She needed him to become her monster. Over the weekend, Graham played the perfect husband. He smiled, made pancakes, took the family to the farmer's market. Megan seemed relieved, almost affectionate, clearly thinking the danger had passed now that the electrician was gone. Monday morning, after Megan left for work and Alexis was at school, Graham drove to a storage facility 40 minutes away and rented a unit under a false name. Then he went shopping, not at big box stores with security cameras, but at smaller shops where he paid cash. Burner phones, a laptop with no connection to him, recording equipment. He'd spent Sunday night researching Damian Shepard. Armed robbery, aggravated assault, served 7 years of a 10-year sentence. Paroled 6 months ago. Last known address was a halfway house in Camden, but public records showed he'd recently moved to an apartment complex 15 minutes from Graham's house. Too close. Way too close. Graham also found Damian's parole officer information, his restrictions, his check-in requirements. The man was supposed to avoid contact with minors, maintain employment, and stay away from his old associates. 3 rules he was clearly violating. Tuesday, Graham followed Megan. He called in sick to his own work, invented a stomach bug, and tailed his wife from a distance. She went to her office at the pharmaceutical company, but at lunch, she drove to Damian's apartment complex. She stayed for an hour. When she left, Graham waited 30 minutes, then approached the building himself. He found Damian's unit number from the mailboxes and spent 5 minutes picking the lock, a skill he'd learned in college from a locksmith friend and never thought he'd need. The apartment was exactly what Graham expected. Sparse, cheap, temporary. But Damian had left his laptop on the kitchen counter, and Graham had come prepared. He inserted a USB drive and installed monitoring software that would give him remote access to everything. Emails, messages, files, even the webcam. 10 minutes later, he was gone. That night, monitoring Damian's computer from his storage unit, Graham struck gold. An email thread between Damian and someone named Mauricio V. The messages were vague but incriminating. Merchandise ready Thursday as planned. Payment on delivery. Buyer's representative will inspect goods before transport. They were still planning it. Thursday, 3 days away. But there was more. Graham kept digging through Damian's files and found a document titled Exit Plan. It outlined how Damian and Megan would disappear after the deal was complete. New identities purchased, travel through Mexico to Central America, fake passports already prepared. Graham also found something that made his blood run cold, a list of previous transactions. Damian and Mauricio had done this before, multiple times. Children as young as 5. And Megan had known. One email showed her researching the market rates for different ages. His wife wasn't being coerced or manipulated. She was a willing participant in a child trafficking operation. Graham sat back in his storage unit chair, the horror of it washing over him. Then the horror crystallized into something else. Cold, calculated determination. He opened his notebook and began writing a new kind of plan. Not just escape, not just evidence gathering. This had to be permanent. Megan and Damian couldn't just go to prison. People got out of prison. They got parole. They got early release. They escaped. They made bail. Alexis would never be safe as long as they breathed. The thought should have scared Graham, but it didn't. He'd spent 3 days learning what real monsters looked like, and he'd discovered something about himself. He could become a monster too if that's what it took to protect his daughter. Wednesday, Graham made 3 critical moves. First, he visited an old college friend named Sheldon Weaver, who now worked in private security. Over beers, Graham spun a story about hypothetically needing to disappear for a while with his daughter due to a custody issue. Sheldon, reading between the lines, gave him names, document forgers, safe houses, people who help those running from dangerous situations. Hypothetically, Sheldon said with a knowing look, if someone needed to vanish with a kid, they'd need at least $50,000 in cash and a week to set things up. Graham had the money. His business account, which Megan didn't know about, held almost $70,000 from recent commissions. Second, he met with a lawyer named Catherine Casey, highly recommended for complex custody situations. He told her a version of the truth. His wife was planning to leave with their daughter. He had reason to believe the child would be in danger. He needed emergency custody papers drawn up immediately. Catherine was expensive but efficient. If you can prove imminent danger, she said, we can get an emergency order. But you'll need evidence. I'll have it by Thursday, Graham promised. Third, and most critically, Graham visited Mauricio Vega. He'd tracked down the man through Damien's emails. Mauricio ran a consulting business that was clearly a front for various criminal enterprises. His office was in a strip mall, sandwiched between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. Graham walked in without an appointment. The receptionist, a nervous woman named Rosalind Myers, tried to turn him away, but Graham simply said, "Tell Mr. Vega that I know about Thursday. Tell him I'm the father." 5 minutes later, he was sitting across from Mauricio Vega, a well-dressed man in his 40s with cold eyes and expensive cologne. "You've got balls, I'll give you that," Mauricio said. Walking in here. "I want to negotiate," Graham said calmly, though his heart hammered. "My wife and her boyfriend think they're selling my daughter. I'm here to discuss alternative arrangements." Mauricio laughed. "Alternative arrangements? I'm worth more than my daughter." Graham pulled out a folder. "I have access to pharmaceutical company research, clinical trial data, patents. My wife has been stealing information for months. That's what she planned to sell after leaving me. I can give you that information directly, along with passwords to offshore accounts she's set up. We're talking millions in potential value." This was a complete bluff, but Graham had studied Megan's work computer and found enough legitimate-looking files to make the lie convincing. Mauricio's eyes narrowed. "And what do you want?" "My daughter stays safe. You call off Thursday. And I want Damien Shepard." "Want him how?" "Delivered to me. Alive. Tomorrow night." Mauricio studied him for a long moment. "You know what you're asking for?" "I know exactly what I'm asking for." "And your wife?" "She's my problem." Mauricio leaned back, considering. Then he smiled. "You're either very smart or very stupid. I'm curious which." "Fine. Show me this data you're talking about. If it's as valuable as you claim, we have a deal. But if you're wasting my time, Mr. Peck, they'll never find your body." Graham pulled out a USB drive, full of files he'd stolen from Megan's computer, a mix of real pharmaceutical data and convincing fakes he'd created using his architectural rendering skills. Close enough to fool a cursory inspection. Mauricio spent 20 minutes reviewing the files. Finally, he nodded. "This works. Thursday is off. And tomorrow night, 10 p.m., your friend Damien will be at the warehouse on Colton Street. He'll be alone and expecting to meet me about the deal. What you do with him after that is your business. And my wife. Not my problem, like you said. But Mr. Peck, don't ever contact me again after this. We're even. We're done. And if I see you again, our arrangement ends badly for you." "Understood." Graham left the office, his hands shaking so badly he had to sit in his car for 10 minutes before driving. He'd just made a deal with a criminal, traded stolen data, and arranged for a man to be. What? What exactly was he planning to do with Damien Shepard? The question hung in the air as he drove home. By the time he pulled into his driveway, Graham had his answer. He was planning to make sure Damien Shepard never hurt another child again, whatever that took. Thursday morning, Graham woke up to Megan humming in the kitchen. She was making elaborate breakfasts, something she hadn't done in months. Pancakes, bacon, fresh fruit. Playing the role of perfect wife. Because she thought tonight was the night. "Someone's in a good mood," Graham said, kissing Alexis's head as he sat down. "Just appreciating my family," Megan said sweetly. "We should do something special this weekend. Maybe go to that cabin upstate." "Sounds great," Graham lied. After Megan left for work, Graham got Alexis ready for school. "Hey, sweetheart. How would you like to have a surprise adventure after school today?" "What kind of adventure?" "The fun kind. But it's a secret, so we can't tell Mom yet." "Deal." Alexis grinned. "Deal." Graham drove her to school, kissed her goodbye, and then made his final preparations. He packed bags for both of them: clothes, toiletries, documents. He transferred money from his accounts. He sent encrypted copies of all the evidence to Catherine Casey, to Sheldon Weaver, and to a journalist he'd researched who specialized in investigative crime reporting, scheduled to auto-send if he didn't cancel it by Monday. Then he picked up Alexis early from school, signing her out for a dental appointment. "Where are we really going?" she asked as they drove. "To meet a friend of Daddy's. Someone who's going to help us stay safe for a while." "Safe from what?" Graham looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror. "From some bad people, sweetheart. But Daddy's got it handled. I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Alexis nodded solemnly. "I trust you, Daddy." They drove to Sheldon's house. His old friend met them at the door, his expression serious. "Everything's ready. Papers are in the folder. Safe house address is written down." "You're sure about this, Graham?" "More sure than I've ever been about anything." Sheldon handed him a key and an envelope. "One more thing. Given what you've told me, you might need this." He passed Graham a small case. Inside was a handgun. Graham had never owned a gun, never wanted to. Now he took it with steady hands. "Self-defense only," Sheldon said quietly. "Understood. Understood." Graham left Alexis with Sheldon's wife Agnes, a kind woman who immediately started making cookies with his daughter, and drove to the warehouse district on Colton Street. It was 9:30 p.m. He had 30 minutes. The warehouse Mauricio had specified was abandoned, its windows dark and broken. Graham parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, the gun heavy in his jacket pocket. Inside, the space was cavernous and empty except for old equipment and shadows. Graham found a position behind a stack of crates with a clear view of the main entrance. At precisely 10 p.m., headlights swept through the broken windows. A car pulled up, and Damian Shepard climbed out, looking around nervously. "Mauricio," he called out. "You here?" Graham waited. Damian walked further into the warehouse. Then Graham heard it, another car. This one pulled right up to the entrance, and 2 large men climbed out. They grabbed Damian before he could react, slamming him against a support pillar and zip-tying his hands. "What the hell?" Damian shouted. Mauricio said. "Mauricio's not coming," one of the men said. "But your friend Graham is already here." They dragged Damian deeper into the warehouse and left him tied to the pillar. Then they drove away without a word. Graham waited 5 more minutes to make sure they were really gone. Then he stepped out of the shadows. Damian's eyes went wide. "You? What the fuck is going on?" "Hello, Damian," Graham said quietly. "We need to talk about what you were planning to do to my daughter." "I don't know what you're talking about, man. There's been some kind of mistake." Graham pulled out his phone and played one of the recordings. Damian's own voice filled the warehouse. "The girl comes separate. I've got buyers lined up, but they want her checked out first. Fresh merchandise, no history. That's premium pricing." Damian's face went pale. "That was just talk, man. Just bullshit talk." 7 children, Graham said, his voice flat. "I found your records. You and Mauricio have trafficked 7 children in the past 4 years. How many of them are still alive, Damian?" "You're crazy." Graham pulled out the gun. Damian started crying immediately, all his bravado vanishing. "Please, man, please. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. I'll turn myself in. I'll confess, whatever you want." "You'll do that anyway," Graham said. He pulled out his phone with his other hand and hit record. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to confess. Everything. Every child. Every sale. Every person you worked with. Names, dates, locations. And you're going to tell the truth about Megan's involvement. All of it. And then you'll let me go? Then you'll face justice. Real justice." For the next hour, Graham recorded Damian's confession. The man broke completely, sobbing out details of crimes that made Graham physically ill. But he kept recording, kept pressing for more information, more names, more evidence. When it was done, Graham made 3 copies of the recording and sent them to different locations. Then he called the police. "I'm at the warehouse on Colton Street," he said calmly. "I'm holding a man named Damian Shepard at gunpoint. He's wanted for parole violations and has just confessed to multiple counts of child trafficking. I'm also reporting attempted conspiracy to kidnap my daughter by my wife, Megan Forbes Peck. You'll want to send multiple units." Graham hung up and looked at Damian. "They'll be here in 10 minutes. If you move, if you try to run, I will shoot you. Do you understand?" Damian nodded, still crying. Graham stood there, gun trained on the monster who'd wanted to sell his daughter, and waited for the sirens. The arrest of Megan Forbes Peck made regional news. Pharmaceutical manager arrested in child trafficking conspiracy, read the headline. Graham had released just enough information to the media to ensure the story couldn't be buried or spun. Megan's lawyer tried to claim she'd been coerced by Damien, that she was a victim too. But the recordings destroyed that defense. Her voice, cold and calculating, discussing the market value of her own daughter. The emails where she'd researched previous sales. The offshore accounts in her name only. The prosecutor, Everett Adkins, was a career professional who'd built his reputation on protecting children. He took one look at the evidence Graham provided and threw everything he had at Megan. She's going away for a very long time, he told Graham in his office. The recordings, the documents, Damien's testimony, it's overwhelming. And we've already arrested Mauricio Vega and 3 others in his network. This case is going to take down an entire trafficking operation. Will my daughter have to testify? No. She's the victim, but she was never touched, never even knew what was planned. We won't traumatize her further. Graham nodded, relief flooding through him. The trial took 8 months. Graham had moved with Alexis to a different city, changed their names legally through witness protection protocols, and started rebuilding their lives. Alexis, remarkably resilient, adjusted to their new circumstances with the adaptability of children. Graham told her a version of the truth. That mom had been involved with bad people, that they'd had to leave to stay safe, that mom was going to jail for a long time. Do you miss her? He asked one night. Alexis thought about it seriously. I miss who I thought she was. But I'm glad we left, Daddy. I'm glad we're safe. In court, Megan maintained her innocence to the end. She claimed the recordings were fake, the evidence planted. Graham was the real criminal. But the jury deliberated for only 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. 25 years minimum. Damien got 35, and with his prior record, he'd likely die in prison. Mauricio took a plea deal, 20 years in exchange for testifying against his entire network. 23 people were eventually arrested, and 12 children were recovered and returned to their families. Graham sat in the courtroom the day Megan was sentenced, holding Alexis's hand. His daughter didn't want to be there, but Graham felt she needed to see justice happen, to understand that bad people faced consequences. When the judge read the sentence, Megan's composure finally cracked. She screamed, fought the bailiffs, turned to Graham with pure hatred in her eyes. You did this. You destroyed everything. Graham just looked at her calmly. No, Megan. You did this the moment you decided our daughter was worth money instead of love. 2 years after that day in court, Graham Peck stood in the backyard of their new home, watching Alexis play with their rescue dog, a golden retriever named Scout. The house was smaller than their old one, in a quiet suburb 3 states away, but it felt more like home than the other place ever had. Jeremy Maxwell, an architect colleague who'd become a good friend, joined him on the deck with 2 beers. How's she doing? Better. Her therapist says she's processing everything in a healthy way. The nightmares are less frequent. And you? Graham considered the question. He'd spent 2 years in therapy himself, working through what he'd done, what he'd been willing to do. The gun had never fired. He'd never intended it to, but he'd gone to that warehouse prepared to do whatever was necessary. That knowledge lived with him every day. I'm managing, Graham said. Some days are harder than others. You saved her life, you know. If you hadn't acted when you did. I know. Graham took a long drink of beer. I know. A car pulled into the driveway. Catherine Casey, the lawyer who'd helped him through everything, emerged with a folder. Sorry to interrupt boys' night, but I thought you'd want this immediately. Graham took the folder and opened it. Inside was a court document. Megan Forbes Peck's appeal had been denied. 25 years stood firm. It's really over, Catherine said. No more legal challenges, no more motions. She's done. Graham felt something unclench in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying for 2 years. Thank you, Catherine, for everything. After she left, Graham walked down to the yard where Alexis was throwing a tennis ball for Scout. She looked up when she saw him, and her smile, still bright, still genuine despite everything, made his heart ache with love and relief. Hey, Daddy, watch this. She threw the ball, and Scout bounded after it. Graham watched his daughter play, thought about the horror they'd escaped, the justice that had been served, the life they'd rebuilt from ashes. Clayton Singh, the electrician, had saved their lives by being brave enough to show Graham the truth. Graham had saved them by being smart enough, strong enough, and yes, ruthless enough to act on it. The story could have ended so differently. In another version, Graham would have confronted Megan directly, given her a chance to explain, trusted the system to protect them. In that version, he and Alexis would likely both be dead or worse. But Graham had made the hard choices. He'd become the monster his family needed, dealt with actual monsters, and somehow come out the other side with his daughter safe and his soul, if not intact, at least still functional. "Daddy," Alexis called. "Come play with us." Graham set down his beer and jogged over, letting Scout jump on him while Alexis laughed. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, co-parenting with trauma, managing Alexis's occasional panic attacks, the guilt that sometimes swamped him in the middle of the night. But tonight, in this moment, they were safe. They were together. They were home. And Megan Forbes Peck was exactly where she belonged, locked away for decades, unable to hurt anyone ever again. Justice, Graham had learned, didn't always look the way people expected. Sometimes it was messy and complicated. Sometimes it required good people to make morally ambiguous choices. Sometimes the line between hero and villain blurred until you couldn't see it clearly anymore. But in the end, the only thing that mattered was this: his daughter was safe, laughing, playing with her dog in the backyard of their peaceful home. Everything else, the darkness he'd touched, the risks he'd taken, the person he'd had to become, was worth it for this single, perfect moment. Graham Peck had won, not by being the strongest or the most ruthless, but by being a father willing to do absolutely anything to protect his child. And in the years to come, when Alexis grew up and understood the full scope of what had almost happened to her and what her father had done to prevent it, she would know one unshakable truth. She had been loved, completely, fiercely, and without limits. And sometimes, that kind of love was the most dangerous weapon of all. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.